that. And Jasmine also maintains several R packages, including Shiny LP, Shiny FA, Avalister, I think is how you say it, and a few other at that one. So, Jasmine, thank you so much for preparing this talk. I know, many of us have like dabbled in using Claude Code or other styles of tools like this. And
Mhm.
people, we are all so full of questions and like how who is effective, like what are good practices, who is being effective with it. I especially appreciate, Jasmine, like you come from a space where like you really focus on like mission driven organizations and have that piece in mind as like how can we use these responsibly as well in these different contexts. One thing I forgot to ask you before we got started, is it okay if people write their questions in the chat, and maybe we'll have some time for them at the end? And Jasmine, do you have any preference if something's like really about what you're saying right then? Like, how would you feel about me pointing your attention to it? Or do you prefer we save them all to the end?
I have a goldfish memory, so please interrupt me
Okay.
if you have a
Okay.
question. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
totally fine.
Okay, great. So for folks who are here, feel free to type in the chat any questions that you have as we're going through, and Andrew and I will keep an eye on that. And then also we'll have some time for questions at the end, and we can have you raise your hand and unmute and all those kinds of things. So Jasmine, thank you so much for coming, and let's kick it off.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the lovely intro. I really appreciate like the invitation. And I'm so excited to like kind of dig into the part two version of this talk, I would say. Part one was from the R and AI conference from our consortium last fall. And so, yeah, really excited to just go over what has changed. It's felt like a lifetime of things and developments and just how I leverage Claude and Claude Code, and how I've just tried my best to make it. I think the goal is always like trying to make it more as efficient as possible without personally sucking the joy out of what I love doing. And so, yeah, kick it off a little bit more. So this is me. This is a picture of me, but you can see me. Here's my email address too. If anybody has any questions, I am pretty timely and I love to get nerd sniped. Feel free to ask away. But I am an embedded data and AI partner for mission-driven organizations. I tend to work with nonprofits in about three different-ish ways. So I do training and workshops. So those could be individual training, one-on-one. I've done larger trainings with different groups, either coming from different orgs or underneath one org, which I really love. I really help steward organizations through this whole process of putting together AI governance plans. And then the follow through for that is the enablement and the adoption and helping folks feel empowered and not overwhelmed and not afraid. There's much to be afraid about, but it's quelling and distilling between what to be nervous about and what to be excited about, really. And then this is like the big nerd bullet point at the end, custom data and AI tools. And so that's really the implementation that I go on and I take and I partner with my clients. Often a lot of mission-driven organizations, they do not have a large tech team. They don't have a team of software developers. And from coming from that world as well, it was a really interesting surprise, but it's been really fantastic to show up with my skill set and my values and be in service to these organizations because these folks need the technical assistance and support almost even more than the behemoths that I've previously worked for. But yeah, I really love serving in this capacity. And it's been really interesting from mixing the data side and the AI side and trying to find a path forward for folks that really respects their values and has still an alignment of dignity in a lot of these folks' work who touch really sensitive communities and impact them. So it's a bit about me. Um, awesome. So a little bit of a retro looking back. Uh, I last talked in November at the RNAi conference, and this talk was a similar title, right? Me, myself, and Claude. And a bit of the takeaways from that was really focusing on like how I scale from a solo practitioner to being able to serve more clients, take on more projects while not pulling out my hair. And I shared a bit about how I was able to treat Claude like a developer partner to really help like reclaim a lot of mental bandwidth. As a business owner, as a consultant, as like an open source developer, there's a lot of different hats. There's a lot of different things going in your head. And I had honestly lost a little bit of the joy in shipping and really leveraging Claude into my workflow allowed me to get back to um, shipping things on the weekend, which I don't do. I try not to do so much. My kids like to hang out. So, but it really was a critical aspect of how I see myself, how I find like my own professional joy in the work that I do. And so that was really sort of the takeaways of where I was at in my workflow with Claude and Claude Code. And right now it's been a only a few months, and I'm like here to share just some workflow development and some updates that hopefully you all could take and adapt on your own as well, because I think they've really made for even more. I thought I was efficient back in November. I personally feel like I'm even more efficient. I'm able to deliver more. I'm able to have both parts of my brain working together in terms of like I write code, I go to client meetings, I write documentation, I work on proposals, and so I'm able to do all of these different things while also still doing the stuff that I find joyful while not working. I don't work 80-hour weeks. That's not my goal. My goal is to have a lot of work-life balance. So this is all in service of that. So a bit about like my daily sort of developer setup. So I use Positron as my IDE. I unfortunately cannot tell you even the last time I opened up our studio, which I love, but like Positron is just has fit the bill really, really well. I almost see it as like my own little mini command center, because I also when I use Claude Code, I'm not fully agentically letting Claude Code do absolutely everything. I worked very, very hard for all of my R knowledge, and sometimes I will open up a file and I will tweak things on my own. And that makes me really happy, but also allows me to be part of that human in and on the loop of still staying in control because there's also like a cost consideration of am I going to engage Claude Code for, making the tiniest fix, or is that something I can go and have like this really connective relationship with the project that I'm doing, the code I'm doing, and have greater insight. So it's Positron, it's Claude Code as the extension inside. And then I've got this little microphone emoji, which we'll touch on in a bit. I have been talking a lot to my computer since November, an extraordinary amount, and it's been really interesting to one get out of that muscle memory of typing, which is great, which has a lot of really great adaptations in terms of like my memory and what I can recall. I've actually recently moved to I've got post-its all over my desk in meetings now. I've been taking hand notes. So there are some aspects where I've been kind of going backwards in terms of really identifying like where Claude fits in best in my workflows and where I still want to show up and leverage my own expertise in how I run my consulting company as well.
Before we move to the next, you may be
Yeah.
about to show this, but we have a question
Yes.
here that when you say you run it inside Positron, are you running Claude Code, the terminal UI in the terminal, or are you using the extension, or
I'm
both?
using the I'm using the extension. I very
Okay.
rarely. I think I initially started out using the terminal inside, but
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
use the extension. Yeah.
Great, great.
Awesome.
Thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. Um, yeah. So a bit about I think sort of like evergreen topics in terms of a AI assisted workflow. At least for me, I think it was a newer concept last fall, but I think it bears weight of still mentioning. So a lot of my project memory lives in Claude.md files. I love it. They're human readable, they're machine readable, and it really allows me to sort of have this portability. I have clients who have very unique missions, but sometimes what they come to me and ask for, there's lessons to be learned from each that I don't need to repeat across clients, across projects. And so a lot of just some of like the quirky things I encounter in how I'm setting things up, like pinning particular like package versions, but like having that specified, and like not just in the R&B block file. Some of my projects include like data orchestration, and like the way that I sort of have those set up, like those don't all need to be inside the build. Like those happen in a separate process. So just some quirks on that as well. And just some aspects about like remaining, like maintaining like the manifest well, or at least reminding myself to update the manifest before deploying to Connect Cloud opt-in. And so a lot of these project memory features and things that I've been building over time, they really mirror, I think, the way I was like have been slowly building my R knowledge and expertise. And now that's just encoded in a Claude file. So I really recommend it's something that has not changed for me. I think it's just grown in my development. And as I take on more clients with maybe different tweaks and asks, but they're still repeatable enough to where having them and sort of enshrined in these files make a lot of sense for me. Um, a topic that in a Q&A in the talk last year, I didn't have an answer for. I now have an answer for it because it's become a really important part of like my workflow. And so I have developed a few sub agents and skills. And so sub agents are just like kind of specialized like collections of skills that have like tool access and do things a bit more agentically and then can come back to you with a response or a change. And then skills are just sort of in the Claude Code context. They're like reusable commands. You can set them up to do work on a slash command as well when you're inside the Claude Code extension. And so this is just a really example of like some really domain specific things that I've set up. So for my clients, very often I produce shiny dashboards, web applications, and having some bit more of automation that I can delegate to agents has made for a really more efficient time, allowing me to sit and I still brainstorm, I still sketch, I still wireframe, but allowing a little bit of automation in terms of like reviewing and also scoring against accessibility and brand compliance. These have been really, really helpful to also bring a cross client perspective and the way and methodology way I do things, as well as even, yeah, a dashboard kind of validator. So real takeaway is like I am, even from November, I'm not having to re-explain myself as often. I'm able to understand the parts of what I used to do, translate those into agents and or skills, and be able to almost develop this new layer on top of a workflow that allows me to just get a little bit more standardized in the way that I do things. Awesome. And with that thought as well, just kind of like hopping back to the November timeframe and perspective, and really always wanting to like not abandon the art community whatsoever. I find immense amount of joy being a part of this community, and it's been really formative in how I see myself as a developer and a professional. And so I've always had sort of like the thought pattern of like, all right, I'm going to build for others, but why and where and how will that take shape and where that makes sense? And when I look at it sort of like in the context of agentic development for R, really shifting like what is just a personal workflow to what could other folks generalize and take with and run, especially for folks who might be the sole developer at the organization, whether they're at a mission-driven org or they're at a small startup. Like the overall like technical architecture for somebody who is shipping code on their own is a little different. It doesn't scale as a lot of the other solutions are out there, but it still needs to have a lot of the same rigor, a lot of the same processes. And so just thinking about like systems and not just one-off things has been really helpful. And then for a lot of the teams that I work with, there are a lot of non-traditional developers who have the full access to leveraging Claude and Claude Code, which is fantastic. I love that more people have more access to tools and information and learning and can help contribute. But there's not a lot of strict review processes going on. And I say strict, that could just mean there's zero. There's just nothing going on. There's no gates of just, hey, are you going to be committing a piece of you know a client secret out there? Like there's just not a lot of like gating when you have a lot of folks who have both not the traditional developer background, have access to a lot of tools, and have limited accountability in terms of other folks on their team that can engage with them to help them grow, help that code be secure, help it be, what it was intended. And then, yeah, having that pivot, especially with the lens for mission-driven staff, like I previously last year was really focused on me, right? How can I just make my code faster, make it more efficient? But like the turn in my thinking and how I think about my consulting business and then my partners that I work with and collaborate with is like, how can I build secure, accessible guardrails that others can take and ensure that there's still like a meaningful human interaction and a handle on what can get deployed. And that's especially helpful and understandable for like low tech folks. And so that's really been the shift I've been having in the last couple of months of continuously developing systems that are combating, I think, the worst of the worst AI slop that has been out here. Awesome. So I have a little bit of an answer to the solo-ish developer, the AI slop, and the need for some aspect of guardrails. So I developed this package. It's on GitHub. It's not on CRAN at the moment. It's called Counselor. If you go see the README, you navigate there, it's all Coming to America theme. I don't know why. I think I was working on this at night and I was like, I missed watching that movie. So you will see the README, you will see some GIFs. There are some references. But at its core, right, Counselor is a voice-powered code review tool. And it's designed especially for our developers. Just has like a little bit of layering of our functions. And its real objective is to provide that essential human oversight for AI assisted development. When folks are using like GitHub Copilot or Claude Code or Cursor, there's so many opportunities to not engage with what you're producing, either from a thought that, oh, these AI tools and systems have gotten so much better. They seem to know better than I. Let me auto accept, let me push ahead, let me not take that time to engage with what I'm producing and understand and have the why really distilled from there. And so when you're doing that, Counselor on high level, it is a pre-commit hook and it intercepts and it begins to have a very deliberate, natural conversation with the developer where you can ask questions about what were the code changes before they're committed. And there's like this really intentional, deliberate process of saying like, I am committing this code and saying it out loud and getting that reassurance and getting that explanation. I have found has been really a wonderful aspect of making sense of where I end and begin and where Claude Code ends and begins as far as my workflow. So I'll do a little bit more about Counselor, and I've got demo too. All right, a bit of the core features I mentioned before, right? So it's a Git pre-commit hook, and it initiates sort of like an interactive voice session. It doesn't have to be for every single commit and every single project. You can have it just running in a single project. And I mentioned before, there's like some really deliberate things where you either approve a commit, you say, I'm going to abort this commit, we're going to reject it, I'm going to go back, I'm going to rework some things. And you can also just cleanly exit out of that state as well. There's some really, really awesome components of Counselor that I thought about mainly from also hearing about all of the just the news cycle of folks agentically like taking down their whole company's production database. So a lot of a lot of features of Counselor were driven by these really awful scenarios, but examples of where there was a step that could have easily been missed, that could have been manual, right? You could have manually done that creation of that SQL table. Like there are just like some aspects of where you're not winning points by just doing a full end-to-end Claude Code session. There is a lot of value in taking some time to be intentional and pause. And then there's some aspects about Shiny app vulnerabilities and just some intricacies around broken reactive dependencies. And then, yeah, once again, trying best to capture and reduce agentic risk when it comes to destructive actions as well. So why voice AI? I've mentioned this maybe a little bit more, but I'm going to try and synthesize a bit more thoughts. So bit more of a forced attention span when you are going at the speed of light, in which Claude Code often feels like that. Requiring that really verbal approval of like ship it or nope, we're rejecting it. You're really demanding like the part of you, the human, the professional, that is so core and cannot be extracted away, cannot be replaced by AI. And having that forced attention be brought back, I think, is super critical. It also helps to like kind of prevent a little bit of context switching. Very often, like it's a mixture between like code and a browser, maybe some documentation, or maybe like a SharePoint drive. Like there's just a lot, and I think voice AI is just it's been a really interesting adaptation of sort of keeping things all within like a similar literal context window of workflow continuity. And then voice AI really allows you, I think, to like ask more complex questions. I don't know about you, but my fingers get tired. I have very tired fingers as I'm typing a lot, and there's a lot of really great like accessibility aspects when it comes to leveraging voice AI. And often I've found once you get into the rhythm, you're talking faster than you're typing for sure. And that allows you to iterate, experiment, and test things out even further. And voice AI, especially with context of Counselor, like these conversations are like automatically sort of transcribed and logged. So you get to also get that level and record of like why things were changed in addition to a Git commit history. But like that, having that like trail of a transcription log of your conversation, I think is really helpful too when you're trying to sort out like, is this a decision that needs to be interpreted by a human, by an AI system, by a colleague who is new, or new to a code base? And so I think it's just like voice AI has so many, I think, positives. And I've found it as far as like doing our developments really, really helpful. Awesome. So a little bit on like the tech stack, and I have like another chart we'll go into as well. So I'm using Pipecat, Cartesia, and Deepgram. And that's really like the vocal pipeline. It manages sort of like the voice activity detection. Um, There is Claude patched in behind it. So that is taking the in between the voice and the text and providing the context back about what what has changed in a code base, what needs explanation, what are some of the gotchas. And then there's like specific aspects about loading R packages, environments, and then yeah, the gatekeeper of all of this is, and it really definitely blocks that commit progression, which can be really frustrating, but sometimes such a natural stopping point to help verify that what you're doing is what you intended to, and that you're also not potentially committing any type of malicious code or things that should stay secret. All right, bit more of an architecture diagram. So we have our package, and so that's us, the developer, initiates commit and gets stopped, and here's our GitHub. Counselor works through this orchestration through Elmer and Reticulate Bridge because PipeCat, the open source library for multimodal conversational voice AI, is Python. I knew that going in. Reticulate was like the top of mind aspect so that I can still leverage PipeCat in the way that I had envisioned. And so it's really interesting aspects. And then we have the security guard, and that helps to analyze to make sure you're not like wholesale deleting databases or folders that are essential on your computer, and then requires that really physical approve commit, abort commit. And then we have the external services going through PipeCat as the pass through. So Deepgram does the speech to text. Claude's then translating that and providing that answer, and then Cartesia is going from the text to speech. So it's got this back and forth of speaking, translating into text, sending it to Claude, Claude translating it back into text for Cartesia, and then back into speech so that you can also hear it as well. And I believe when I first did this package, I think this is using Sonnet, just because when looking at models for all of this, this requirement, I think, of like how powerful of a model, how, versus everyday task. I think this is Sonnet, but I think it's also customizable too now to bump up to Opus, which I gotta be honest, for a bunch of trainings and talks, I feel like I try not to put as much specific Claude model references because they have been changing so fast. So this is customizable in terms of the model you're pulling from Claude. All right, little demo video, and I'm going to make it not so loud. So this is a demo video. This is positron. You can see I've got my my Claude Code set up, and this is, I built a little fun little game for setback, also known as pitch. One, so that I can get better and beat my friends, and also to learn.
I see 4 files changed with mostly UI improvements. You fixed a typo change in Claude to the suit, added CSS styling for a Claude suit indicator, and improved the trick result explanations with suit symbols. I did flag one possible concern. There's what looks like a hard-coded credential detected, though scanning the diff I don't see any obvious API keys or passwords. This might be a false positive from the word Claude appearing in the code. The changes look reasonable overall, just UI polish and better game messaging. Would you like me to explain any specific part, or are you comfortable proceeding with the commit?
Can you explain why that original status message was not showing the right suit?
And it's listening and it's listening. There's a ton of improvement work to get this to be even more as near time as possible, low latency. So it's processing the speech, putting it back. And by this time, you could probably read it faster than it's going to report back out to you. And so that's on the future improvement plans. But just to not have this be zapped by
Claude
demo.
But Claude is just the internal variable name for the trunk suit in your setback game. From a player's perspective, that's confusing messaging.
All right, I will pause this demo because there's just a lot of me yelling at the IDE for a little bit. But this is a real example that I used. It was really interesting as well. This app that I developed, it was completely, I refuse to say vibe coding. It is completely vibe engineered. And there comes a point though when you give up your understanding, but you also still need to understand what you're delivering. And this is sort of that medium in between bridge of that. And so this is, I think, a really great example of counselor in action within within Positron, and it kind of outputs it right in the terminal. Perfect. All right, so there are weird things that happen when speaking to AI, and we kind of saw and heard some of that when I was talking a bit about the kind of like the custom R terminology. That one is sometimes I find myself when I'm engaging with Claude Code, either in leveraging Counselor or just generally leveraging the conversation with Claude. I tend to spell out package names. I find that that works a little easier, or even like custom variables. So there's a little bit of oddity when it comes to the speech to text model, but that could be solved with also not having a lot of messaging in that prompt. So I try not to, I could talk forever, right? I try to keep the amount of interaction short and attainable. And then there's also a bit of like when you're speaking in general, and I tend to, just as a me thing, I tend to write the way I speak, which means there's a lot of like and like uhs and like just total silence like that. And so some of those actually show up, and I think it's really interesting to have like the voice agent like be able to understand like that silence and whether it's interpreting background noises or not. But it's just there's a bit of oddities when it comes to speaking, and it's a new part of your workflow, and you just have to get used to it. And I spent a lot of times, I think, getting in the back of my mind of I'm going to spell out this word. I'm going to specify, hey, I'd like this in a bullet point response as part of my voice conversation as well. So there are some odd things that happen. I think there are some solutions, but it is all seemingly still faster than typing often. And then, yeah, a bit about some of the other voice AI things I'm trialing with our projects. And like in various ways, right? So I have been using Whisper Flow, not very long, but it's been really interesting to see how Whisper not only, can I talk to the IDE, I can talk into Claude Desktop. They also have all of the native little voice adaptations as well that you can use. But I also find it really interesting to see like what that interpretation layer, how much better it can be, how much better it can translate my mumbling, my pauses, my spelling out of words, my vocal formatting. And so I think it's been really interesting just to try out what are the other different systems. So I think I really like Whisperflow at the moment. And I know when I'm going to like something is when I'm probably going to pay after the trial. So that is my indication. Also, just recently trying out Granola. So I think there's like an interesting aspect and relationship between meetings, talking about R in meetings, and having that translated well from a meeting transcript and notes and action items. And so I think Granola is pretty interesting. And then I gotta say, like, what are my like tried and true things? Because I'm not always on my computer. I sometimes it feels like it is, but I am a really big fan of just recording voice notes on my phone, and then translating those later. Maybe those go. I have dispatches in beta for Claude, and so often I will go from voice note to dispatch because I like to think in maybe more high level aspects, and I want it distilled into action items or tickets or deliverables. And so yeah, these are sort of the other voice AI related tools that I'm leveraging. So a little bit, if I could like sort of leave you all a bit with like sort of like reclaiming like my why. I do think like the age of AI and like very specifically generative AI has me personally always feeling like, well, the AI can just do it. Where is my role? Where is my value? Where is my, my reasoning for turning on my computer every day? And like me coming to a lot of just mental clarity about being like my value specifically as a consultant is really not defined by the direct R code that I write. Having that deep association with what is out there, I think is lovely. But for me, like I have seen a lot of real positivities in how I view myself, how I view my consulting organization, how I show up and work with my mission driven clients by understanding at the end of the day, like I am also there to provide strategic clarity to, wear my values on my sleeve and align with organizations that have similar values as myself, and help my clients live out their mission through the tools and systems I create. And so, as a R person, as somebody who's involved in agentic R development, I think really sitting with and reconciling maybe the uncomfortableness, but also distilling like at the end of the day, also this is fun. At least it should be fun. This is really joyful. It is fantastic and interesting. I've learned a lot and I want to keep learning and growing as a developer, as a business owner, as a consultant. And I've just found a lot of really exciting aspects of where my brain gets to think now because I can delegate to Claude Code, and all of the Anthropic products rather, so that I can still do what I do best and show up and be my geeky, nerdy self and get really excited about new packages or new features, or new tools. And so, at the end of the day, I want to like sort of leave everybody with like my why. And I think there's still a lot of value, and worth in not having just full AI created code and systems. So awesome. So that's it for me. Thank you all so much. I have the link to the counselor package. I have a number of issues. I really invite folks, if you're interested, work on an issue, propose other things. I love the idea and I want to keep building on the aspects of counselor, to have more in the lens of like AI safety infrastructure for our developers, for Python developers. It can be used by a lot of other folks. Yeah, and I'm happy to connect with folks on the various platforms. But thank you everybody for coming and attending. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, or at least attempt to answer questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jasmine. That was super interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. If you're here and you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can have you unmute and ask a question. I am going to kick off just to reflect a little bit on that thing you ended with, like my value as a my value in what I do. It actually turned out to not be literally the code I wrote, being so interesting. I'm gonna tell you something I feel like I'm have observed in people that I'm working with, and kind of ask you to reflect on it. Like, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How would you maybe change it? Okay, so the people I work with, I feel like I am observing two kinds of reactions from people. And one of them, and I think I don't know, my hypothesis here is that it's about like what were people actually internally motivated by? And maybe we didn't see it before and now we're seeing it maybe. So one category of person I think was like internally motivated by like outcomes, like
Mhm.
what they shipped, like how they impacted people, what they like the end result. And they were
Mhm.
really good at writing code because they were really motivated by the thing they were building. And those people, I think I am observing them being like feeling unleashed, feeling like they're having
Mhm.
fun. And then another category of people, like what I would observe, I think, is it turns out maybe they were motivated by like like the elegance of the code, or like that
Mhm.
they artisanally made a beautiful solution to something. And those people, like real talk, are having a hard time. They're like, wait, you took away the fun part of my job. Like, what is going on here? They're like having a hard time. What do you think about like maybe that sort of like I kind of contrasted maybe like two sets of motivations. What do you think
Yeah.
about that? Do you feel like you've learned something about yourself as a professional? Like you said this a little bit, but
Mhm.
like where are you landing on this or thinking about like as you interact with other people and whatnot? Like what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I have my own response, and then I also have like a a story that I heard from somebody else. And it's something that I also like I think about when I'm interacting with my clients. And just to say, like a lot of mission-driven organizations, they're feeling like they're behind. I think a lot of us maybe on this call we're like, oh, we at least know a lot more of the technical components. There's a whole world out there of folks who are just now starting their journey, and they're having a lot of that same tension. And so I'll lead with the story in a way where I heard that a organization was going through the process of streamlining their workflows and integrating AI, and the executive director specifically had gotten really upset, like really emotionally, involved. Because when you dug deeper at, it wasn't just the automation of a particular workflow. That workflow it involved her going outside for a walk to complete that task. And so
Interesting.
when you really like dig behind like the why of people's resistance, I think it's so hard to then be that person to say, well, it's this black and white thing. It's either AI or not AI, and like people's I think real understanding of what they do and how they do it has to be core and essential to how all of this is being integrated with organizations. I will say for myself, I too have been really obsessed by the craft. um, but I also let myself like specifically um, I time box myself. I love to iterate almost to a fault. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it also needs to be at a place where I'm very proud of what it is. And yeah, I still let myself have those moments of just being like, I'm gonna do it myself. I know what I'm doing. I have been frustrated enough by our code pre all of this generative AI. Like I know what's going on, but I time box myself because I do not have the time or the luxury or like the staff. I don't have all of that to sit there and go down a rabbit hole. But I still allow myself to sometimes be obsessed and driven by craft. But it's also yeah, it's not black and white. I think folks can have those types of competing feelings throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout moments in their professional career. And I think it just takes time. And hopefully like there is like a good happy meeting, like medium and discovering, other parts of your work that are, really were mundane and we're really taking more time. And those you can feel comfortable about delegating and offloading to Claude. But yeah, so that's sort of like
Yeah,
my
yeah.
answer and a
Yeah,
story.
no, I
Like
love that. I
it's
love that. Thank you for sharing that story. One of our participants, Sarah, highlighted that that you are putting it in the loop with like your own judgment. And in fact, are having deeply iterative kind of processes here, like really iterating back and forth. And maybe I'll just get a little explicit about this. I think I know the answer based on how you've spoken here, but um, would you say you still look at every line of code today? Like, do you truly look and read at every line of code, or are there some things that you iterate, you run it, and you don't really think about the lines of code so much as like either the behavior or how it fits together? Where are you landing right now on that?
Yeah, that's a great question and way to keep things accountable and transparent. There are some things that I do not fully look at,
Yeah,
but they're
me too,
very
to be honest.
few. Yeah, it's very few and far between. Because also, right, I'm not driven by like the amount of lines in
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
script.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't care about that. I care that it works. I care that it is safe. I care that it is doing what it is intentionally designed to do. So yeah, I would say like I'm spending maybe 5% of time looking at um, code that I don't need to look at, right?
Yeah.
But other times, like that's exactly why. So that's exactly why, like, I run Claude Code in Positron, and I don't do it directly in the desktop app. I want to be able to see those diffs. I want to be able to see those file changes. I want to understand. And like often I'll pull up that exact file, I'll highlight the word or the function or the quirk. Like I really like being in that way. And so for me, that verification and that accountability, it 100% always sits with me. But I'm also at the same time doing a judgment call of like, where are my eyes absolutely critical?
Yeah.
And then where is it just like that's just a read me? Like I don't,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, nice. Sharon has a comment here saying she feels like she does love the craft of code, but maybe we over romanticize it. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like maybe we have this idea when in reality it's like, oh, I was doing something kind of that was like grunt work. Like I was actually, so like maybe we think about it with not quite an accurate perspective, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sharon. I love that comment and like sort of the take on it. Yeah, I think there previously was a lot of like uh just celebrating like extreme frustration, and just, oh, I tell people this story all the time, like this was 2013 or 2014. I was like, I hit this like really gnarly bug in my early journey and I stopped coding for like 2 months. And I tell it as a lesson of being like, oh, something can get so frustrating, you can go away, you can come back, you can overcome. I wasn't doing anything for 2 months. Like that's ridiculous. That's not a celebratory moment. That's a moment of saying like, hmm, like what else should have been going on at that time. And so I also think it's great rediscovering as AI is taking over different portions of a workflow, something that I didn't used to do a lot and now I do now deliberately before I start client projects is I sketch wireframes
Mm.
by hand. Like I leverage Figma, that's fine too. Claude design is super interesting. But I I've got some coffee. I got like a quiet morning. I've got this sketchbook and I sketch like user flows for Shiny apps. It brings me joy. It's something that I never used to do. But it's where I've found that that is my new happy portion of my workflow. It doesn't necessarily slow me down. It keeps me in and on the loop in the whole process. And that's a new thing that I've gotten to discover because I have a lot of um, good workflow development with Claude Code for that initial aspect. So yeah, I am I am sketching by hand as a developer.
Interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Nice. If you thank you folks who are typing in the chat. Feel free to also raise your hand if you got a question you want to answer. If not, maybe I'll like wrap up one more thing. This kind of related to the voice piece because I think you're the first person I know in real life who does this. I've heard about
Mhm.
people doing this, but I think you're the first person I've really talked to about this. And it sounds like you are really finding this like a good way to work. Do you think, okay, one thing I've noticed about myself is that I, for example, take in information really well visually.
Mm.
And I honestly have actually a little bit of a hard time with like phone calls or like I'm usually okay on
Mhm.
Zoom can I can see the person's face, but like
Yeah.
my spouse makes fun of me where I like if I'm on a phone call, I'll like close my eyes and concentrate because it's like I don't really process it that well and or I like I don't understand lyrics and music. Like
Mm.
it's just like sounds like the grown-ups and Charlie Brown to me? So do you feel like the rise of these tools are like letting people lean into their like what works for them individually more? And have you heard of other things people have tried other than voice? I guess I'd say that to be like, I'm kind of skeptical voice would help me, at least the computer
Mm.
talking back to me. Like I could probably talk to the computer, but talking back to
Yeah.
me I was probably not. Have you heard of other ways people are using this, or like, do you see this as
Mm.
like honestly like a step forward in accessibility? Like how have you been thinking about these different modes here?
Yeah, super great question. I gotta be honest, I feel like I haven't been hearing a lot of folks like
Okay. Yeah.
talk about voice AI in terms of like this specific level of development. Not to say that there aren't plenty of people who are probably doing it. I would say that I think personally like a push towards accessibility. I think it was years ago. There was somebody who I worked with who had a particular disability, and they were doing voice dictation. It was a really interesting, starting out from like, hey, what's the problem, and like developing a solution for it. So I think that that is one of like the high aspects of voice AI. I do think it's right. It's really specific, and I have a very specific way that I work, and I'm sure as everybody has like their own. It's not just your computer development environment; it's your overall environment and how you perceive and process things. I have personally really recently noticed that like I work a lot better with headphones, whether there's music in them or not.
Oh,
um,
interesting. Interesting.
yeah, and it just keeps me focused and grounded. And so when I think about voice AI and whether you're talking to it, you're talking back, it also allows me to feel like I'm not 100% by myself in a way. Like if I were, years and years ago, like being in an office and hearing the ambient chatter and being able to have that, like, oh, that person's like two desks over. I can go ask them. Like, there's a little bit of an like a community building aspect with just talking with yourself in the voice AI. So I think there's a bit about that too. Uh,
Nice.
so
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Great. Great. I think the other questions in here are things that either like I could answer or whatnot. We're coming up to the hour, so I'll just pause again to say, Jasmine, thank you so much for preparing this. Really interesting to hear about what you're doing in your real work in your real life. And so this talk will be available on YouTube pretty much immediately after we wrap it up, like or very, very shortly at least. And the Salt Lake user group is kind of going on our summer break here now for a little bit, and we will be back in the fall, and we'll probably have like two-ish talks and one-ish in-person networking event in the fall. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Jasmine, especially for preparing this for us. I will see you around and talk to you